If you'd like to know why eating wild is the key to burning more body fat, then this episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show is for you.
Welcome to the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show, where each week you will hear the real-world experiences, life lessons, and guided principles that every highly driven man needs to master their health, productivity, and relationships by sharing conversations with the world's most successful people in fitness, nutrition, supplementation, and mindset. Meet your host, Benjamin Brown. He is a fitness and nutrition expert, consultant to Fortune 500 companies and World Championship sports teams, a husband and father of 3, and has been helping men transform their physiques, optimize their energy, and own their fatherly mission since 2005. Thank you for joining us today, and without further ado, let's jump right in.
Yo, what up, guys? Welcome to episode number 77 of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. Today on the show, we're talking about the wild diet with the fat-burning man, Abel James. Abel James is a New York Times bestselling author. He's a musician and virtual reality producer and host of the hit podcast, Fat Burning Man. His new book of irreverent poetry is called Designer Babies Still Get Scabies, and that will be available July 27th of this year, 2019. Man, what an honor it was to have the Fat Burning Man on the show today. We talk about his wild diet and how to lose 20 pounds in 40 days, why it is imperative that we start to eat more ancestrally or eat more wild in terms of foods that Mother Nature provides, and why those are beneficial from a fat loss standpoint. So what we cover in this episode is how to build out your plate from a wild diet perspective, how to utilize the wild diet for different body types, what sort of lifestyle factors are also part of the wild diet, how it's not just relegated to the nutrition that we take in, but also the lifestyle that we're living and how that impacts how our body stores body fat. We talk about stress management, eating seasonally, and a lot about the misinformation, the marketing, and the propaganda that is so relevant today in the fitness industry, in the fitness nutrition industry. And so I think you guys, as always, are going to love this episode. Abel James is a wealth of knowledge. He's been in this business for quite some time. And if you haven't already, or if you're not already familiar with the Fat Burning Man show, you guys need to head over and check it out. Without further ado, let's jump in. Here's Abel James. Abel James, the man, the myth. Welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing?
Really well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, man. It's an absolute honor to have you on the show. You're big time, bro. And I've been following you for a little bit. I know you don't acknowledge that, but you're doing great things in health and fitness for nutrition. So with that said, let's just jump in and talk about your book. You wrote a book called The Wild Diet, and it says go beyond paleo to burn fat, beat cravings, and drop 20 pounds in 40 days. I'd love to hear a little bit about the impetus for that. But before we do, it says go beyond paleo. What's the deal? You didn't want to get pigeonholed into the whole paleo camp?
When you publish with a giant publisher, sometimes they don't let you use the words you want and make you use other words that you don't want to use. So that may or may not be the case with this instance. Hence, right, self-publishing the next book.
Very good. And we will jump into the next book, but you're famous for your wild diet and your fatburningman.com and all of its resources. But talk to us about the wild diet, in a nutshell. What is the wild diet and how did it come to be?
Yeah. So long story short, I see it as dietary self-defense and lifestyle self-defense. It's not something where it's the magic bullet. It's not new. It's not anything that's ridiculous or crazy. Although it may be crazy when compared to the standard, the SAD diet, the way that most people are eating. It's dramatically different from that. But the wild diet is the name of the concept in the book, is something that, words are so tricky and hence, like the poetry book that comes after. I could have called it nature's diet or something like that.
Sure.
But the word nature and natural has been so abused and twisted and distorted. It means nothing. Like Whole Foods is ironic. Like you can't use those words anymore. the way that you should. Wild, to me, is a concept and a word that hasn't been so brutalized and twisted as the others. And to me, what wild represents is something that's dramatically different from the norm, but also, more importantly, as nature intended, that honors Mother Nature. So we're working with nature instead of trying to dominate nature to do our bidding. And so as that relates to like building a plate or looking at your food, it's going to be mostly plants, things that are obviously healthy for you that your grandmother would have told you to eat, in a well-meaning way. Making your foods at home is extremely important if you want to eat real foods as nature intended and know what went in them. So that's a big part of the lifestyle factor. We really teach a lot of people how to do that and focus on, okay, yeah, we get the health stuff. We know we have to eat our vegetables and high quality meats, but how do we make this fun? How do we still eat cookies? How can I make a meal for 8 people in 15 minutes? And so we try to focus more on that sort of thing because it's me and my wife and then a small team who help us out virtually. But we do this because we find great meaning in it, and we love teaching people ways to thrive themselves because I basically hit my rock bottom from a health perspective way before a lot of my friends did. I'm in my mid-30s now. This was like as soon as I hit my 20s, got my first real job, got my first real great health insurance and great doctor. Right. Following that advice made me fat and sick within less than a year. And so eventually starting up the podcast, putting out my books and that sort of thing is a way to help give people an alternative to that world of suffering that I really did experience, unfortunately, or at least got a good old taste of in my early 20s. And I never want to go back.
What made you kind of come to the realization that I need to shift to eating more, to what Mother Nature intended, as you call it, wild, or as I've heard you say, ancestral and from the earth? Kind of where did that come from for you?
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm really thankful. My mom is trained as a nurse and became a nurse practitioner, but as a whole, like add-on to that, or even kind of a separate career, she became an herbalist and a holistic health practitioner and an author herself. And let's see, it was about 25, 30 years ago now, I think, 20 to 30 years ago. She was on the health circuits, giving speeches and going to conferences and that sort of thing, giving out pamphlets about how to use plants to heal. And so for me, that was just normal, like growing up when I got sick, because, this is another thing. I got extremely sick with a very high temperature when I was an infant. And so I'm allergic to almost every antibiotic, and I'm allergic to a ton of things. So there weren't many options to heal me outside of kind of the alternative world. And so that was kind of the default. And it was my rebelling against that when I got that fancy doctor and that fancy job and that fancy insurance that really made me sick. And it was, in fact, I was running 30, 50 miles a week. I was eating almost no dietary fat. I was trying to do all the things that he told me to, stay away from cholesterol, all the low fat, propaganda that was still kind of going on in the 2000s, but is now, really been tempered down. I was in the thick of it and tried following it, and it just clearly didn't work. I got sick so fast and I got overweight so fast that I'm like, this clearly isn't working, right? And so let's try something else. And so it was really marrying the world that I came from of alternative health, real food, honoring nature that my folks taught to me. And not just my mom either, but generations kind of going back were farmers and lived in and came from that world. And that was all that they knew. Combining that with, when I was overweight, I'm like, what is some alternative? Like what makes sense as an ideal for health? Who gets it? And it would be, competitive athletes. It would be bodybuilders and kind of like fitness models know how to manipulate their body composition. So clearly there's a path to do that as well and figure that out. And so it was doing research into kind of the physiology of how the body works and looking at carbs and macronutrients that allowed me to experiment with intermittent fasting, get fat adapted, and then kind of experiment with cyclic ketogenic dieting and trying to add mass in the right places. This is back in my 20s when I was dating and stuff and kind of interested in that. Now it's much more focused in health than it was then. But that was kind of like the hook back then. So I feel like, to me, having gone through a lot of that process, I feel like I can empathize with a lot of people on the other end to some degree, because like the reason that I do this is because I never want them to be in that position that I was in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it was pretty intuitive for you to just turn to real food, and you already had a decent understanding of what to eat and how to start to eat it and how to implement it to some degree. And then
to some degree. Yeah.
And then you married that, which I think is fascinating, 10, 12, 14 years ago, with elements of intermittent fasting, which as popularized as it is now, and something people have been doing obviously forever. It just wasn't such popular terminology or fad or, terms. But how did you, what was your experimentation with the intermittent fasting process, and is sort of the rationale as you marry it with this wild diet? Is it from a health component? Is it from just a caloric control or caloric restriction standpoint? And how do you kind of weave those together?
Yeah. So, and I love that question. For me, I've tried to experiment with seeing how much I can get away with not eating from a performance standpoint, just kind of lifestyle standpoint. I think if you're going to be fasting, you're not really, or if you're even going to be like totally fat adapted, you can't be extremely competitive. Like you would be maybe in your teens or 20s, but that's not really my goal now.
Right.
Back then, maybe more so, but I was, it's like that saying, you feel your oats, right? It's like if you're running a lot or you're doing a lot of working out, you feel your oats. And you feel if you don't eat your oats too. You feel if you gas out and you bonk. I've been there. And so, at this point, it's really more of a lifestyle thing where I enjoy eating 1 or 1.5 meals toward the end of the day. Usually around 3 or 4 is when I start. I'll have, some greens in the form of a juice, a smoothie, or maybe a salad, maybe some bone broth to get going, and just kind of like light snacking, nuts and things like that. But staying away from sugars. I'm making sure that the first thing that hits my belly, I find that this is really important. Like the first thing that you eat should be as healthy as possible, should be like not sweet. Otherwise, you can really set yourself up for later cravings or just kind of like this big binge. So you want to get this nice base of fibrous foods. And so another thing, it's like when I was younger, I really had a lot of pride that I think came from conditioning, being a man. It's like the more you eat, the more of a man you are. And I kind of had to get that out of my conditioning to some degree. And now I feel like the more I can get away with feeling good and not eating a ton or not eating often, the better off it is from a lifestyle factor. It's like if you're eating 3 to 6 meals a day, that's a lot of shopping. That's a lot of preparation. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of eating out, whatever. If you're preparing and cooking and cleaning up after 1 or 1.5 meals a day that you're eating at home, it's like, it's hard not to lose, if it makes sense, where it's like, it's hard to win if you're out there in the world trying to like order out from restaurants and do all this stuff that in the normal world. But if like you're willing to totally experiment with throwing that away, then eating less often can really help. And I try not to overcomplicate it or say like, you're going to get a huge boost of growth hormone or whatever. Maybe not. Everyone's a little bit different. There are a lot of rabbit holes you can go down, but I can say after doing this for like 9 years of this type of fasting, starting more with, I should say, I've been doing this style of fasting, the 1.5 meals a day for probably around 7 or 8 years. But I started with basically, to get back to your earlier question, just pushing out breakfast. So I always thought that I was hungry all the time. I was eating all the time. I was hungry all the time. Then I realized that if I don't eat, oftentimes I don't get hungry, and that hunger that might come passes. And so and this is how I encourage other people to start, is just push out whatever you're eating a couple hours. And if once that feels normal, push it out another hour, another couple hours. And on the days that it doesn't feel good to do that, by all means eat. You probably need it. You know what I mean? But then after pushing it out for a while, I was lifting more back then. I I was working out more often. And so I found that eating around noon and working out around that time, or maybe right after that first small meal, was really great back then. And so now I really like the even simpler and eating less often thing. And being in my 30s, I can kind of get away with it more. And I should say, everyone's different. My wife, she still eats rarely in the morning, but sometimes. More often, it's between like 12 and 2 that she'll have her first meal, and then continue eating until, maybe 7:30 or something is when we wind down with some chocolate or a nice. That's the other little thing. It's like, if you eat less often, you can afford eating little treats every once in a while, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's so interesting, man. I think it really lends itself to the environment that we experience on a daily basis, and obviously our stressors and our environment and just the blood sugar regulations and the things that we place upon ourselves that can influence all of those things, and so obviously it's a very big shift for the average American to do what you're doing, and the position that you're in is very different. So if we were to kind of dial it back to just the normal person, and they're in a position where they're really looking to improve their nutrition, they already have a good idea of, obviously I want to eat whole, real foods on a daily basis, and I might be experimenting with a little bit of fasting here and there. I might, wait until 10 or 11 or 12 on a few days a week, and I seem to be able to consistently push that back as I become more comfortable with the fasting process. But kind of how would you build out, like what would a typical, you had started to talk about, typical plate would look at least half full of vegetables. And so how would you kind of build out a day for just the average person real quick?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it depends on the person. And it depends on the goals. Are we talking someone who's just looking to tune up their health a little bit, or with any particular end goal in mind?
Yeah. I'm going to say like someone who's just generally, like, they're physically active. They exercise a few days a week consistently. They're cognizant of their nutrition. Like I said, they do have some good nutrition habits in place to the degree that they're willing to eat a fair amount of vegetables. They're willing to prep their food to a degree, but we're all quote unquote busy, right? None of us have that much time, or at least we haven't prioritized it to the degree that you would need to be making all of your meals in a given week. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I would encourage people at the beginning to take the shortcuts, in the sense of like, everywhere has a salad. You know what I mean? Like if you show up at a place and it's like, I don't know what to eat, I'm going to freak out. So I guess I'll just get like something that I know is probably bad for me and give up here.
Yes.
It's like, no, everywhere has a salad. McDonald's has salads and bottles and stuff. I don't know if they still do, but like, just watch it, do the obvious thing. Watch out for all of the goop and mayonnaise and junk that is in most of the dressings. But it's like, if you want veg, no matter where you are, pretty much every place has that at this point. Yeah. So let's be honest about that. And then for me, I'm really big on, because it's not like, we do live a weird and different life for sure. Most of the time it's at home, but also we lived in a fifth wheel traveling around the country for 2 years, and a fifth wheel trailer RV, if people don't know what that is. And so we've lived in more than a dozen different states. We've lived off grid plenty of times, and we have always found a way to make it work. We've always found a way to find a farm, or find a market, or find a corner store, or find something, or just fast, find a good excuse to fast. But, obviously not everyone is starting there. So what I would say is like, if you're going out, do the right thing. Like deep down, what the good advice is. You should eat your veggies. You don't need fat burning man to tell you that. You really don't, right? It's like, you need to do it. You need to put in the work. You need to be willing to be very weird and be a fluke. But I would say, okay, so here's one way to win, whether you're at home or especially on the road, is pack up in your pack your like go-to, are healthy and filling snack foods. And if you don't have some of those, just like rattling off some of mine, nuts are usually an easy win. Watch out for, fried nuts in terrible oils and a lot too
Right.
much salt and MSG, and make sure that all this stuff is clean. And then I'm a big fan of, if you can find high quality seafood that you like, that's portable and in a can, that travels great to different countries, and we get kind of experimental with that sometimes too. It's like, I found that I love smoked oysters.
Yeah, I love
different
those.
types of sardines, different types of smoked fish. If you're like, ew, sardines, it doesn't have to be sardines. There are so many different kinds. Like, I'll eat canned salmon. You can throw some onions in there. It's really easy to put fresh foods in your pack if you're leaving that day. Another thing, if you're on the road, and I would do this all the time when I was traveling for business. It's like, you stay at a hotel and then you just walk or take an Uber or whatever, not to a restaurant, to a grocery store. You go to a grocery store, then you get whatever foods you want, and maybe you have a little fridge, maybe you don't back in your place, but you can prepare almost anything, and you don't need to cook it. Like, it doesn't have to. I see it when you're on the road, and if this is really your goal to be more healthy, then like, just prioritize it. Make it a priority. Don't go to the fast food place. Go to the grocery store. Like, I literally haven't set foot into like a fast food place, except for like on the freeway to go to the bathroom for a second in years. And it's like, you don't have to either, but you can go into grocery stores anywhere, and almost anywhere you are that you're going to be for business, and find good, fresh veg, maybe some yogurt, throw some nuts in there. What are some other good snacks? There were a lot, 10 years ago, there weren't a whole lot of pasture-raised wild meats that you could get, and pre-prepared and take on the road. Now there are so many like clean beef jerkies, little jerky Slim Jim sticks that are made with grass-fed meats and that sort of thing. Now I would
like hard-boiled eggs, avocado,
hard-boiled eggs, deviled eggs. We sometimes Allison will make these giant salads that we'll have for our main meal, and she's put, succulent, I think it was a filet mignon over the top. We've put barbecue over the top. You can make it as delicious as you want. But the biggest thing about that is just like, prepare ahead of time. Prepare before you're hungry. Prepare the night before. Like, take it with you. Put whatever you can in your pack. Another thing that really helps, that I put in my book too, there are several little like canisters and containers that you can put spices in, like salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and cinnamon and chocolate powder is what I usually put in mine. And those little canisters full of spices can make an otherwise really boring meal or snack amazing. Just like, one that's a go-to is you throw a couple avocados in the pack. They'll last for a few days. You cut it in half when you're hungry, and my wife and I will each have a half. We'll sprinkle some salt, pepper, and then some of that onion powder, garlic powder over the top of that. And it's just use little sporks and then eat right out of the rind. And whether you're camping or in an airport, you can do it.
Hey brother, are you struggling to find the energy to function at your best as a businessman, father, and husband? I want you to know you're not alone. And sadly, the conventional wisdom these days around healthy eating and exercise that has saturated the mainstream is flat out wrong. If you want to find the solution to optimizing your energy and body composition without restrictive dieting, soul-crushing workouts, or adding more to your already stressful and overflowing schedule so that you can finally function like the man you know you can be, then we need to chat. Are you ready to move from exhausted to energized by working smarter, not harder? Go ahead and schedule your free strategy call at www.bslnutrition.com/level up. I'm looking forward to our conversation and enjoy the rest of the show.
So, assuming we're really, we're making a very concerted effort to prep our own foods and eat at home, and we're using recipes from the Wild Diet, how important is it to be choosing foods that are pastured and, or organic or free range, or, how do people differentiate between some of this terminology that is very manipulated in the industry?
That it's such a great point today, because all of these words are very squishy and tricky, and none of them are enforced, or none of them are true. So when people say, well, organic food is stupid and it's overpriced and it's just a big scam, it's like, well, no. A lot of it, organic food at Whole Foods, yeah, a lot of that is
You're right.
big
So
scam.
yes and no.
Yeah. But if you're talking about like what food should actually be, do you want to eat like toxic pesticides on your food that are going to kill you and give you cancer at some point, that are going to kill you early or your body's going to have to deal with? Or are you going to try to keep it as clean as possible? Now, organic only has to be something like 95% organic, and then the other 5% can be pure poison. But even there are pure poisons that are also organic. So it's like, it's not about the organic word. It's
That's right.
about eating clean and being honest with yourself. So it's like, do you want to eat a pig that was standing in its own feces for its entire life and then was sick? And then, the meat, I can say this. I used to work in restaurants, and at the good restaurants, the people who are choosing the meat know that it's the pasture raised, it's the organically raised as nature intended foods that are fresh and haven't been altered by man or machine that really taste the best. They have the best flavors. They speak for themselves. You don't need to over flavor or over spice these foods because they taste great just as they are. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. It's not about how much food costs. I had to get over this. It's about the quality of food.
The point is that I think people need to take a step back and think about the food that they're eating and where it's coming from on a much more grandiose levels. We're never going to be perfect. We don't have to be perfect. Yes. Would it be nice if you can source your own food and get it at the farmer's market and be buying, if you live in a big city, be buying it online from companies where it's sustainably farmed and what have you. And, it is important for people to educate themselves on this nomenclature. Like, what does it mean to be organic? What does it mean to be free range or cage free or grass fed and grass finished? And so we won't get into that minutia, but it's highly manipulated terminology that is simply used for marketing purposes. And so, like you said, is Whole Foods is, quickly becoming not so wholesome and not so vested in the interests of those that are really want to live a healthy lifestyle. Right. Rather, it's kind of being manipulative, which is discouraging and disheartening. With that said, the positive thing is that there's so many more options now at our disposal, to the degree that we can go to the airport and we can choose, to get some string cheese and some hard-boiled eggs and some nuts and seeds, and sometimes it's like some sprouted nuts and seeds, and there's simply a lot more options, but the step is to become more aware of the foods that you're eating in line of kind of what Mother Nature would intended. So I can certainly appreciate that. So let me ask, what other factors are involved or kind of an essential part of living this wild lifestyle and following this wild diet?
Staying away from the things that hijack your brain and emotions is big. So one thing that's easy to stick to is, if you're eating a food and as you eat it, it makes you more hungry, then it's not going to be a good food to fill up on. It's not going to be a good food for your habits. It's probably going to be a trigger food. And so, like social media and reality shows and tabloids or whatever, these foods are meant to go after your primitive nature, your lowest common denominator. And so whenever you feel like that's being hit, be careful, take a step back and try to put yourself back into control. Because otherwise, your hand's going to be at the bottom of an empty bag of Tostitos or whatever. Even if they're organic Tostitos, it doesn't matter, right? Like that's how it's manipulated. Yeah. Anything that is driving you to overconsume any food or any media or any gimmicky workout that's the only workout that's going to work for you, it's all nonsense. This is much more about a practice, the little things you do every day that add up over a long time. It's like, not about eating a salad when you're excited about it. It's about eating a salad every day for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. It's not like it's this thing that we're figuring out for the first time and no one's ever lived this way. It's like this kind of used to be the default, and now we need to artificially create this default. That's probably why they call them health nuts, because it's like a whole different thing. You have to be obsessed with it. You have to be in your own little cult of health fanatics, because otherwise 80% of us are going to be obese by 2030. It's like, you don't want to follow that herd. So you have to be different. You have to embrace that, I think.
Yeah, you have to be very strategic and concerted about how you're building out your day and leveraging that towards success. And it just takes time and energy and practice. And, just like anything else, just like building a business or building your body or all of those things. And there's so many things that are competing for our attention so frequently that it becomes very easily to get sidetracked. And so sort of tapping into why you're doing what you're doing and saying, I'm eating this way because I know that it makes me feel better when I eat this way. And I'd love to crush, some Fruity Pebbles right now and have a couple beers at the end of a long day. But I know that tomorrow I have responsibilities that are driving me, personal, professional, whatever. And those are going to, they're going to subtract from my success with those. And I think keeping that in mind is really, really important. What have you observed as far as how stress affects, someone's ability to live a healthy lifestyle, to eat an appropriate diet in line with your guidelines?
It's tricky because a lot of people use stress as a fuel, especially today, which you can kind of do for a while until you crash out and then have some serious problems. And that's kind of what happened to me in my early 20s. So you need to do the best you can to avoid that. And so if, you're listening to this and it's like, I've been eating well, I've been working out for a while, but I still have extra weight. I'm still not feeling good. Well, are you sleeping? Are you stressed out? Because those are the next things to tackle. And it's hard to do all of these. You kind of have to tackle and master them one at a time, I think. So it's really great to go serially like that, where it's like, let's go after the nutrition. Let's figure that out. All right, let's get the workouts. Let's figure that out. Or too much. I'm not sleeping. Okay, I'm stressed out. This is bad. All right, let's dial down the workouts. Let's focus on just getting solid sleep and recovery for a while. See what that feels like. Okay, I'm feeling a little like bored and too rested and I'm getting a little chubby again. Let's work out again. And then it's just that for the rest of your life.
It's so interesting and counterintuitive, but it seems like if we just had none of this media at our disposal and we were just kind of chilling like in the woods and really able to kind of feel what our body was telling us, what our brain was telling us, I think intuitively we would do the right things.
That's right.
We would say, am I legitimately hungry? I'm going to eat. Do I need to sleep? I'm going to sleep. Do I really feel like going and crushing a workout right now? Or is it me just kind of rationalizing things that I'm telling myself?
Yeah.
That I'm seeing that I should be doing. And so, I mean, none of what you're preaching per se is revolutionary, and that, and you say that.
Not. Watch out for that. In fact, anything that anybody says that's revolutionary today, I think is highly suspicious to begin with, because we don't need more information. We really don't. We need more ways to feel like we're worth putting it into action, and we need more faith that there is a path to be where we want to be, to improve our bodies, our lives, our health.
Yeah, absolutely. How has your view of nutrition changed? Like, because you've been at this a long time, and I can sense that, there's areas of immense frustration, like when we talk about food marketing and propaganda.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how your view of food and the industry, and especially the weight loss industry, man, it's so frustrating at times. But how has kind of that evolved for you over the years?
It has evolved. I, especially when I was younger had a big chip on my shoulder, having been tricked. And so I was really against shakes. I was against kind of like the easy things that even though it's like, yeah, they work for some people, but it's like, I don't want shakes. I don't want you to feel like you need shakes. I don't want you to feel like you need supplements or anything like that. And it's like a year ago, my wife and I launched a health supplements company, and we have a number of supplements, and we're going to be putting a shake out. But I don't think of it as a shake. And I'll tell you why. And some of the things that changed my mind, it's like, it was more my ego saying that those things are bad. And it's judgmental, saying that like all of it's bad and you don't need any of it. Like, that's not correct. That's not quite correct. But I think being young, you can afford to be that stupid for a little bit and kind of see how that works out for you, right? But it was, I take jazz piano lessons, and I study with a man who's wonderful. He wrote a great book called Effortless Mastery, named Kenny Werner. And so he's getting older, and he's been overweight for a while, but like during the lessons in the morning, I noticed he's like drinking a shake in the morning. I'm like, what's in your shake? And just kind of talk to him about it. It's like, well, if this master, is just like finding, it turns out, I can't remember how much he lost, but like over 80 pounds. And he just basically drank the shake in the morning instead of whatever else he was doing, and then ate normally for the rest of the day. And it's like, man, he's not going to cook for himself. He's no giant. He's not going to make a giant salad. Let's be realistic here. And so I think you need to be careful with that, because like organic, it can be totally abused. And a lot of times, like, people only sell diet books because they have shakes to sell, and they only do that to keep you hooked and keep you fat and keep you sick so that they can keep making money out of you and exploit you. And so trying to find, I guess, a way to do this with integrity that actually helps people is a challenge, but has allowed me to, I think, broaden my vision of what works for people. And I try to be non-judgmental at all about, like, if something is serving you and working well for you, I don't care what I do. I don't care that it's different from you whatsoever. I think that's great, and you should keep doing that. And also, even if I don't personally do something or take something, I think it's important to honor that there are infinite things that can be helpful for people.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, I think anyone who's been in the industry for quite a while, and I've been in, for more than 15 years, and I think at times, especially early on, you can be a bit dogmatic or a bit of a zealot, and it's part of the learning experience. And it's kind of, you don't know what you don't know. And as you progress and evolve, it's sort of like, okay, well, this is what I believe and how I choose to live my life, and I want to share that with you. And if it's something that you can learn from and grow from, and that works for you, then great, because there's plenty of people that need help to the degree that if it works for you, great, let's roll with it. If it doesn't, I'm sure and confident that there's someone else who will appeal to you more. And so you've obviously found a lot of ways, or have a lot of ways, to express yourself creatively. And I know that kind of music has been something that you've had as part of your life forever, as you alluded to with the jazz piano. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your upcoming venture with your poetry book.
Yeah. So I've been playing the good guy Captain America for a little too long. And so now it seems an appropriate time to have fun with words. If the evil marketers can use them against us, then I'm going to give them a little taste of their own medicine. And so these little poems are, 15 to 60 seconds long, maybe. They're little ideas about things that we're struggling with today, like technology, the surveillance state, corrupt politicians. And I really dig into a lot of things that are that make me vulnerable, that might make the reader challenged and vulnerable as well. But I think that's what we all kind of need now, is something that's a bit fun, maybe a bit whimsical, but also challenges us to be better than we are, or think about things a little bit differently. And so I don't know what this book will do, because I'm not used to ticking people off, and this will tick some people off.
I think it's One, I think it's funny. I mean, I've read through
Cool. Thank you.
a bit of it, so I think it's very imaginative and creative and funny. And I appreciate that. You like you said. I mean, you're expressing yourself and your frustrations, which is justified. And yeah, it may piss some people off, but it's probably going to appeal to a lot more people and draw a lot more of your tribe closer to you, which ultimately is a really good thing. And so, so much of your creative expression seems to revolve around, you being fiercely protective of your time and your diet and your exercise and your lifestyle habits. And I think a lot of this has to do with being very cognizant and intentional about what we consume and what we can allow to consume us. So I find it only fitting that I end our time together here by reading a passage from your upcoming poetry book, if that's cool with you.
Please do. Yeah.
Awesome, man. So the book is called Designer Babies Still Get Scabies. And the passage I'm going to read is called The Consumers. So bear with me here, guys, and we're going to jump in. So it's called The Consumers. And as it goes, it says, there's more to life, I presume, than to consume, filling our bellies noon to noon, blowing our bodies up like balloons, trashing billions of plastic spoons, sitting scared in our cocoons, idolizing greedy, disgusting tycoons, using oceans as petrochemical spittoons, making dumps of all the lagoons, treating rivers like our bathrooms, spewing smoke out by the plume, turning dinosaurs to dirty fumes, testing poisons on baby baboons, murdering whales with rusty harpoons, sniping all the endangered loons, fracking every last prairie and dune, shooting rockets straight to the moon, firing fireworks from June to June, hoping we're all immune to the reckoning that looms. Fierce hurricanes and unprecedented monsoons, deadly wildfires and Cat 5 typhoons, heat waves cook every plum to prune, while we get sloshed and sloppy at saloons, swallowing deep fried crab rangoons on our infinite honeymoons. Companies and capitals ruled by goons, sacred rituals and corporate ballrooms, $10,000 slave labor suits on the grooms, shopping for new shoes every afternoon, nibbling manufactured plastic macaroons, sucking coke by the tablespoon, believing political cartoons, recruiting more platoons, electing more buffoons, hypnotized by the croon of atomic warheads that go boom. At this rate, we'll be marooned and dragooned on Mars or Neptune. That would be inopportune. But friends, it's not all doom and gloom. Buffoons will be lampooned when I'm in the room. You see, we've all been groomed to believe we live in a vacuum, but our reality wears a costume. If we just plant flowers and let them bloom, swap fast food for our favorite legumes, mine are peanuts, ditch toxic chemicals in food and perfumes, get more heart in the boardrooms, more love in our bedrooms, grow a few backyard heirlooms, feed kids veggies in the lunchrooms, teach some truth in the classrooms. We'll see there's more to life from womb to womb than to consume. Abel James, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. As I said, man, I appreciate everything that you're doing to help people live healthier lifestyles. And where can people find out more about you, brother?
Well, first, Ben, that was a great reading. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Best place to find me, if you're looking for the podcast, it's called Fat Burning Man. You can go to fatburningman.com. There are over 300 episodes there. And then for the goofy, artistic, and musical stuff, abeljames.com is the website for that.
All right, guys, you heard it. Check out the links in the show notes. This is episode number 77. So you're going to find it at bslnutrition.com/episode 77. Abel James, you're one of the good guys, man. I really appreciate you, and definitely going to have you on again soon.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Take care, brother. Thank you.
You too.
Did you love this episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show? Then head on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave a positive rating and review. And more importantly, share this with other men that you know are dedicated to leveling up in every area of their life by learning how to live healthier, more energetic, and productive lives so that they can optimize their health for their family and future. Thank you for listening. And if you want to find out more about how you can work directly with Ben, then just head on over to www.bslnutrition.com/level up.